the message they were focused on, the one that could cause you to potentially be plucked out of your home at any particular point in time with absolutely no recourse, that was ignored also. Hi, welcome to all of our new subscribers and members here on the channel. My name is Reese Waters and I'm troubled. Now, I mentioned the curious slide of the Latino vote in my reaction to the election. You have all of that and you couldn't see fit to divorce yourself from the white patriarchy. What's happening? What is happening? That is a conversation that absolutely needs to happen. But let's actually dig into the numbers, shall we? Let's look at some NBC exit polling data. You got white men going 39 to 59. At least white women came through a little bit more than they generally do. They did far better than white men. And black men, wow, all these conversations about black men, and he got 20% of the black vote. Black women doing their thing as always, certainly the most reliable voting bloc. Latino men at 44% to 54%. He won the Latino vote. Didn't just parse off a couple here and there, didn't increase his percentage. He actually won the Latino vote. Now, just for giggles, I happened to see their exit polling by age, and one thing kind of caught me as being suspicious. Kamala Harris won every age group except for 45 to 64. That was the only age group that she lost. It was Gen X. Am I 45? No, am I 40? Let me think, do the math. No, I'm not 45 yet. It was Gen X. What's wrong with y'all? Now, if we look at the Latino voting through the years, you see a slide happening each and every election from 2016 to 2024. And that only makes less sense when you realize how aggressively Trump has been targeting Latinos from 2016 to 2024. Apparently, as he's intensified his attacks, he only gets more support from Latinos. Now, if you have a natural slide from if you look at Latino men, you have a natural slide from 31 to 23, then you might expect in 2024, maybe lose another few points. Hopefully you can mitigate that because of, I don't know, the mass deportation signs. Maybe that might mitigate the slide a little bit. No. The slide was intensified this time around to flip the Latino male vote to Trump. Now, I'm looking at Hillary Clinton. I'm looking at Joe Biden. And then Kamala Harris. What could it be that caused the Latino vote, the Latino male vote specifically, to crater to such a degree? I mean, a slide is one thing. You lost 8 points from Clinton to Biden. But to lose almost over 30 points with Latino men, what could it be about Kamala Harris that would cause that to happen?
Coming from an immigrant family, there is this sort of trying to be super American.
Totally.
When people come here, because I know some African immigrants who are all the way Trump. And it's this idea of, I want to be with the side that's waving the biggest flag. I want to fit in.
Now, the thing that she described is a very real phenomenon. And to some degree, I can understand it. If you feel like you have been particularly targeted and you want to find a way to mark yourself safe, why not do the thing and advocate for the thing that the majority would want you to do and advocate for? However, that's no different than you deciding as the bully kid on the playground to bully other kids for the entertainment of your bullies. Like when that happens, we are very quick to point out how wrong-headed that logic is. So it's no different here. Also, that really is only a viable strategy if by doing so, you show differentiation between yourself and the other folks who are targeted like you that are deciding to hold the line. If all of the other folks in the community are deciding to hold the line and you decide to engage in pick me behavior, now you can endear yourself to the majority by actively making life more difficult for those that are holding the line and enabling you to be that differentiation. That is literally the epitome of pick me behavior that she's describing right there.
And there is a huge element, to be honest, of anti-blackness in a lot of this, anti-black Americanness specifically. And Paola and I have talked about this, that there is a part of that anti-blackness is a piece of it. Even though Enrique Tarrio, who's the head of the Proud Boys, is a black Latino, but he's down with white supremacists, down with them. And there's this idea that I'm black, but I'm not black. I may look black to you. I may be black if I'm walking through Bloomingdale's and get followed around. But in my mind, I'm identifying with whiteness because whiteness means privilege and it means not being a black American. This has to be unpacked because this shift among Latino men is significant. And it says something about where we're going in this country, about whether we can create an appeal. There's also, the last thing I will throw in is the creation of the idea that everything that Vice President Harris was proposing is communism. That is a potent argument for a lot of Latinos, and it works.
One more time for those in the back, Joy Reid.
And there is a huge element, to be honest, of anti-blackness in a lot of this.
Are we ready to talk about it? Are we ready? Are we ready to talk about it? We have seen anti-blackness exhibited from other minority groups many times. We've seen many examples of this. It's rarely been so critical as it has been in this 2024 election. And dare I say, it is high time that we address this as a minority group. What exactly is it about black people, black Americans, that become so objectionable to other groups, where they feel just so comfortable in their anti-blackness? Because I have a hard time believing that if it were a different minority group, they would feel so comfortable divorcing themselves in order to do the work for the majority. This is something that we become subject to time and time and time again.
It's on track to now become the first Republican to win the national popular vote in the past 20 years. What are your thoughts on this result?
I mean, I think, first of all, I think that we're going to have to take stock because every single poll that we were looking at, every single one was way off, not by a little, but by a lot. We saw, for example, that young people were basically breaking for her when we actually are looking at the exit polls, dead even. We saw a massive change in the Latino community where we thought that she was up by 34 points. Not so. And even the white woman suburban vote, who we expected to break for her, did not. They went for Trump. So what did we miss in the polling that was not happening on the ground? I can tell you that for the last 3 weeks, my team and I, we've been in Pennsylvania, we've been in Nevada, we've been knocking on these doors, and this real idea of malaise is setting in. People are not doing well who should be voting on the Democratic Party side, and they're feeling it. When you talk to them...
What do you mean not doing well?
Not doing well economically. You know, when we would do polling and when we talk to these young people, these are Latinos who are 18 to 29-year-olds, and they would say rent was their number one issue. And then you say, well, is it because you want to move out of the house? They're like, no, I need to balance my checkbook because I don't know if I can afford a meal or 2 meals a day.
It's about survival.
Survival.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're saying that if we can't have a conversation of it's not enough to talk about economic issues around abortion, but also talking about bread and butter issues. That's what we're happening. We're seeing a massive realignment in our political party around socioeconomic and class and educational attainment. Do you have it or not? And those are the conversations that we need to start having if the Democratic Party is to be able to mobilize a community that they technically do represent on paper.
Now, what I am internalizing from this is failures in messaging from the Democratic Party. Because if you want to tell me that people are voting based on rent and the affordability of housing, which is something that Kamala Harris spoke about consistently, yet they refuse to acknowledge our standing as an economy in the world and our recovery from COVID, or hold him responsible for his mismanagement of COVID, which also affected our ability to recover, yet at the same time, completely ignore the very real possibility and, dare I say, probability of mass deportation going so far as to stop anybody who looks like an immigrant. And we understand that in this deportation fever, there will be those that will be caught up in it who shouldn't be. In the face of that, you decide to vote based on rent when we're in the best situation in the world, and he's part of the reason why it isn't even better.
70% of the Latino workforce works in either hospitality, construction, or farm workers. 70%. They don't have high educational attainment right now. Their children are going on those paths. And so if you do not have a party that's talking to them about the bread and butter issues, the issues that are going to make sure that they are going to not only see the light today, but eventually climb that economic ladder, that's the disconnect. And one of the things that we have to decide on the progressive side is, how do we communicate the values that translate to being able to pay your rent, to be able to pay your bills? I can tell you that when I went door knocking in Pennsylvania, not everybody's, they're working class, they're working hard. They're not union members. They don't have a collective. There's not a bargaining. Farm workers don't have unions. Construction workers don't have unions. I mean, you can go down the list, right, of these major areas of workforces that don't have a collective voice.
Now, she talked about communication and the disconnect, and I actually will agree with her on that point, because you certainly can't tell me that Trump and the Republicans were focused on bread and butter issues specifically. What was the policy? What was the policy? Because she was talking about bringing prices down all the time. She was talking about affordable housing all the time. She was talking about grocery prices all of the time. So I'm trying to figure out exactly how that message got missed, yet at the same time, the message they were focused on, the one that could cause you to potentially be plucked out of your home at any particular point in time with absolutely no recourse, that was ignored also.
Donald Trump made major gains with Latino voters, particularly Latino male voters, last night. And joining me now from Phoenix to unpack all of that is MSNBC contributor Paula Ramos. She is the author of Defectors, The Rise of the Latino Far Right and What It Means for America. The perfect person to talk to on this point. Paula, talk about the family that you were with. They talked about some of their fears. Say a little bit more about that and what they're expecting to happen starting next January.
Yeah, Joy, this is when it feels real, right? I spent the night with those families that we just saw, mixed status families that I have to say at the beginning of the night were holding on to some form of hope, believing that this country, maybe for a minute, would reject Donald Trump's vision for America. At the end of the night, though, they understood that this is a country that chose mass deportations, which has become the core of Trumpism, a country that chose to separate families like that. And so I think this is the moment when things start to feel real, Joy. These words, these visions, these things that Donald Trump has said, it's real now, not January 20th, because this is the moment when Renata and Regina, those two young girls that you saw, right now, as we're speaking, her parents are actively thinking about self-deporting to Mexico. Fidel, the young Latino man that you saw, his mom, who's undocumented, is completely overwhelmed with fear. Today, I spoke to immigrant families, a woman called Lupita, who's thinking about who is going to have custody of her child, of her daughter. And so I think what's important to stress here is that this isn't just now the reality in a place like Arizona. There are over 22 million people in this country that live in mixed status families. We're talking about over 10 million US citizens. And so what is happening is that we have pushed a new chapter in American history that may see a chapter where we will see mass deportations, mass family separations of American people.
Now, the only thing that I can think about in trying to reconcile so many families who are scared, as was just outlined, which I can certainly understand, with winning the vote of the men in that same population and having a slide with the women in that same population. The only way I can reconcile that is such an overwhelming majority of those who showed up to vote felt like, not me. It's not me. Get them out of here. It's not me. They ignore the fever that comes with the mass deportation. They ignore how they also get swept up, if not in the actual deportation, certainly in the perception of otherness. And maybe their resentment of being swept up in that is the thing that caused them to want to pick me out of it for the majority. Ignoring the fact that they really have little to no intention of separating you in their minds ever.
And we've seen that a spokesperson for Donald Trump says the incoming administration will, in fact, begin the largest mass deportation effort in history. They said it was a promise that Donald Trump made to his constituents, and so they're going to do it. So this is not a theoretical thing at this point. So you have talked to people in Border Patrol who have said to you, oh, it won't be racial profiling, how it's going to be done. Walk us through what that would actually look like if a family like the one that you spoke with was subject to this.
Look, I think we don't know many things, but we do know what you just said. They will try. They will try no matter what. And I think what's important to realize, particularly given this idea that over 40% of Latinos voted for someone like him, we have to realize the following. If you're a black and brown person in this country right now, inevitably, we will all be part of the racial profiling that will inevitably ensue if these mass deportations unleash. We don't know who will be sort of deemed American enough in the eyes of Trump's America, right? This is a moment when Trump gets to look at us and decide who is American looking enough. History has already taught us something. You and I have talked about this, Joy. Operation Wetback taught us that they didn't just deport over 1 million Mexican immigrants. Part of those over 1 million people that were deported also included U.S. citizens. Why? Because it was an administration that literally targeted people that were Mexican looking. And so now we are staring at the real possibility, this real question that we've been talking to for many, many, many months at this point, which is who looks undocumented, who looks like an immigrant? And we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know, to Rachel's point, that this is a time to organize, to resist, and to do what people in Arizona have done for a really long time, which is protect their immigrant communities. This is not new for them.
But here's an interesting thing. What made the people that showed up to the polls, the Latinos who showed up to the polls and voted for Trump, feel so immune to this process? Were they told anything? Were they promised anything? What made them feel so immune? It's so illogical that they would show up and vote for the man that has promised he's going to undergo this operation and give themselves the freedom to profile. What made them feel so comfortable voting for that?
They love me. They love me.
It's a question that I think begs an answer, and one that I think we should continue to pursue. The other thing that strikes me about all of this is this is profiling that didn't start recently, and I don't see any reason why it's going to end with this mass deportation process. So you have been profiled as being other and have been subject to the taunts and the abuse and the withholding of some freedoms of Americanness because of this profiling that has existed for as long as America has been here.
We really have to look at profiling. We have to look at it seriously.
You decide to let's just go ahead and pack up enough of them and maybe the profiling would subside. Is that the thought process? So the profiling isn't the problem. You stepping in and really claiming your piece of America, which was promised on the other side, that's not appealing to you. You want to give them the freedom to pack up the lot of us, and maybe that perception, that profiling might stop. Is that the logic?
One of the things in terms of this mass deportation, and they were talking about up to 11 million people. Donald Trump, just during the campaign, has talked about expanding workplace raids to identify and apprehend undocumented immigrants, meaning small business owners could see their business places raided to see who is documented and who is not. Invoking, and Donald Trump has said this himself, invoking the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to declare an invasion, and that was the law that was used to intern Japanese Americans during World War II. So we're talking about something for which there's already law on the books, and building new detention camps. I was in South Texas in Tornillo, and I saw that they know how to do this. Like, they've built detention camps before, so this is not theoretical. This happened when the child separation policies happened. And so given all of that, you wrote the book, and I am reading Defectors right now, and in many ways it's quite depressing to think that Latinos would be in favor of this. But some are, and you've spoken with some of them. A majority of Latino men voted for Donald Trump. In your view, did they vote for him thinking that somehow he didn't mean them? Because some of them likely live in mixed status families too.
Absolutely. Look, I think this is a story that has yet to be determined. We don't know many things, and that is the answer, right? We don't know the story of the Latino vote, but here's what we do know. We do know that Trump was able to tap into, to your point, very real racial and ethnic grievances. He was able to tap into a very real moral panic. He was able to tap into sort of this romanticized version that we have with authoritarianism. And I don't know that these are things that sort of rightward shift. I do not know, Joy, if these are things that we can explain just through politics, right? Just through Trumpism. I think we may have to dig deeper to our culture, to our history, to sort of the weight of colonialism, understand the way that sort of this racial baggage that we carry from Latin America, perhaps that explains some of the anti-immigrant narratives that have suddenly become so embedded within us. Perhaps the sort of traditionalism, the weight that has had on our moral values, perhaps that helps explain why this anti-trans message really resonated with Latino men. Perhaps our own very complicated history with authoritarianism, maybe that helps explain why some people do sort of find strongman rule appealing. And so I think what we do have to do is kind of take a step back and understand that we don't know a lot of these answers. We don't know what is happening. And it is okay to understand that we are not a monolith, right? That Latino voters today have sent a very, very, very different message, and we need to understand what that means.
Now, a lot of really fascinating aspects of deconstructing this vote were brought up. The most significant of which is that some of these votes are colored by lived experiences and passed down trauma that has existed from the home country. And that's something that I can't necessarily speak to specifically because there's so many different countries and so many different experiences that can come into play here. What I would say, though, is for that to trump the actual real life experience that you're having here in this country and the things that are being said and the very real possibilities that are in front of you, that to me tells you that you do feel immune, that you do feel like they're not talking about me. And for you to feel that way means you must have fully internalized your connection to the majority. That is the thing that enables you to make decisions based on things like rent and based on things like trans rights and based on things like my experience with the home country, because I feel completely immune to what the possibilities might be immediately for me. Now, why would they feel that level of immunity?
They love me. They love me.
Ew, that is probably a whole nother video. But I do think one of the very real reasons why they might feel that level of immunity might have something to do with what they've been told.
And I have a lot of respect for Mexico, by the way.
That's a story that's going to continue to play out over the course of the next 4 years. Now, the one thing that I can say, at least to throw a bit of a life raft to the Latino community, somehow voting for the party with the mass deportation signs at the RNC. Let's go ahead and look at the voter percentage of the population. Well, look at this. We had all these conversations about the black vote and especially the black male vote coming up at a whole 4% and 10% collectively for black people. Now we're having all these conversations about the Latino vote and specifically the Latino male vote coming up at a whole 4% of the voting population. But white women coming at 39% went 51% for Trump. White women, come on down. No. It's time for the Summer Jam screen. It's time for the Summer Jam screen.
Hey, white women, sorry to rain on the pity parade, but if you're talking about the 4B movement, because apparently misogyny is a new problem, you should know that between 2020 and 2024, Trump gained 1 percentage point of men and 2 percentage points of women. So there is a new problem, and the call's coming from inside the high school friend group. I think the 5th B stands for Becky.